Nikola Tesla's wireless energy Wardenclyffe Tower. Perhaps the most famous case of suppressed technology belongs to the man who invented the 20th century, Nikola Tesla. While we credit him for alternating current, AC, which powers our homes today, his ultimate vision was far more ambitious and dangerous to the establishment. The invention. In 1901, on Long Island, New York, Tesla began construction on the Wardenclyffe Tower. To the public, it was a radio transmission station. But Tesla's true intent was to use the tower to transmit electrical power wirelessly through the Earth's ionosphere. Tesla believed the Earth itself was a giant conductor. By pulsing energy into the ground at the right frequency, he theorized he could create a standing wave that will allow anyone, anywhere on the planet, to stick a rod into the ground and receive unlimited electricity. No wires, no grid, no limits. The erasure. Tesla was funded by J.P. Morgan, the banking titan who had a massive financial stake in the copper mining industry and the budding electrical utility monopolies. The legend goes that when Morgan realized the full scope of Tesla's plan, he asked a simple, chilling question. If anyone can draw on the power, where do we put the meter? Wireless energy meant energy that couldn't be packaged, measured, and sold. It was an existential threat to Morgan's empire. Funding was immediately pulled. Tesla, desperate to save his project, eventually sold off the tower for scrap to pay his debts. It was dynamited in 1917. Tesla died alone and penniless in a New York hotel room in 1943. Notably, the U.S. Office of Alien Property Custodian immediately seized his remaining papers and research notes. Many believe the blueprints for free wireless energy are still hidden in those classified files. Maurice Ward Starlight. In the world of material science, unbreakable is usually hyperbole. But in the 1980s, a former hairdresser and amateur chemist from Yorkshire named Maurice Ward invented something that actually fit the description. He called it Starlight. The invention. Starlight was a complex plastic capable of withstanding extreme heat that should have vaporized it. Ward claimed it could withstand temperatures equivalent to a nuclear flash. The most famous demonstration occurred on the BBC television show Tomorrow's World in 1990. Ward coated a raw egg in a thin layer of starlight and subjected it to a blowtorch flame, approximate 1,200 degrees Celsius, for several minutes. When he cracked the egg open afterward, it was still raw and cold liquid inside. The shell hadn't even scorched. Tests by the Atomic Weapons Establishment and NASA show the material could survive laser blasts and temperatures exceeding 10,000 degrees Celsius. It was lightweight and non-toxic and could have revolutionized everything from firefighting gear and building safety to spacecraft heat shields. The erasure. Unlike Tesla, Ward wasn't shut down by a specific enemy. He was silenced by his own fear of losing control and the industry's refusal to accept his terms. NASA, Boeing, and the British Ministry of Defense all desperately wanted the formula. However, Ward had seen how inventors were often cheated out of their creations. He refused to patent the formula, which would require revealing how it was made, and demanded he retain 51% ownership in any deal. He would not allow the material to be reverse engineered. The negotiations reached a stalemate. The corporate giants wouldn't invest without owning the IP, and Ward wouldn't budge. Maurice Ward died in 2011, and he reportedly never wrote the formula down. While his family claims to know the secret, the world remains without the ultimate shield, and Starlight has faded into myth. Stanley Meyer's water fuel cell. If there's a holy grail in the world of energy, it is the ability to turn water into fuel. In the 1980s, an Ohio inventor named Stanley Meyer, claimed he had not only found the Grail, but had built a dune buggy that ran on it. Meyer's invention, the water fuel cell, was a device that allegedly split ordinary tap water into hydrogen and oxygen. While standard electrolysis requires a massive amount of electricity to achieve this, Meyer claimed his device used a specific electrical resonance to shatter the water molecule with minimal energy input. The result was a clean-burning hydrogen gas mixture that he used to power an internal combustion engine. The claims were staggering. Meyer stated that his modified dune buggy could travel from Los Angeles to New York on just 22 gallons of water. He became a local celebrity, showcasing the buggy on news reports where he demonstrated the engine running with nothing connected but the water cell. However, the miracle machine attracted powerful enemies. As Meyer prepared to move toward mass production, he was sued by potential investors who demanded proof of how the technology worked. In a crushing blow, an Ohio court ruled in 1996 that Meyer's invention was a fraud and a gross violation of the laws of physics. But the story didn't end in a courtroom. It ended in a parking lot. In 1998, Meyer met two Belgian investors at a Cracker Barrel restaurant to discuss a multi-million-dollar deal. During the meal, Meyer took a sip of cranberry juice, suddenly grabbed his throat, and ran outside. He collapsed in the parking lot, his final words reportedly being, "They poisoned me." The official coroner's report listed the cause of death as a cerebral aneurysm, but the timing was suspicious enough to fuel decades of speculation. Adding to the mystery, just a week after his death, his workshop was reportedly raided, and the dune buggy and his experimental equipment were stolen. The technology that promised to turn oceans into fuel disappeared along with him. Tom Ogle's supercarburetor. In the late 1970s, America was paralyzed by the energy crisis. Gas stations had miles-long lines, and prices were skyrocketing. Amidst this panic, a 24-year-old mechanic in El Paso, Texas, named Tom Ogle, drove a 4,000-pound Ford Galaxy into the spotlight with a claim that sounded impossible. He was getting over 100 miles per gallon. The secret was his invention, the Ogle Mobile. Ogle realized that internal combustion engines are incredibly inefficient because they try to burn liquid gasoline. He developed a system that stripped the fuel line and carburetor, replacing them with a black box that pressurized and vaporized the gasoline into a dry fume before injecting it into the engine. By firing on fumes rather than liquid, the car utilized nearly 100% of the fuel's potential energy. To prove it, Ogle took journalists on a 200-mile drive from El Paso to Deming, New Mexico, and back. The car, a heavy V8, consumed only 2 gallons of gas. The math was undeniable, 100 miles per gallon. The invention threatened to cut the oil industry's profits by tenfold overnight. Almost immediately, powerful interests came knocking. Ogle claimed that a representative from Shell Oil approached him with a check for $25 million. There was just one condition. Ogle had a hand over the patent and agreed that the device would never be produced. Ogle refused. He told the press, "I've always wondered why, if we can put a man on the moon, we can't build a car that gets decent mileage." He wanted a system in every car in America, not locked in a corporate vault. Shortly after rejecting the offer, Ogle's life unraveled. He survived mysterious shooting outside a bar, which he claimed was an assassination attempt. Then, in 1981, he collapsed and died. The cause was ruled a drug overdose of Darvon and alcohol, a verdict that shocked those who knew him, as Ogle was known to be a non-drinker. Upon his death, the blueprints for the Ogle Mobile vanished, and his original prototype car was stripped of the modified parts. We are left to wonder if the 100 miles per gallon car died because the technology failed, or because the business model of the oil industry succeeded. Royal Rife's beam ray. Cancer is the emperor of maladies, a complex beast that modern medicine fights with poison, chemotherapy, and blades surgery. But in the 1930s, an American scientist named Royal Raymond Rife proposed a different solution: physics. The invention, Rife was a genius of optics. He built the universal microscope, a device so intricate it possessed 6,000 separate parts and could magnify objects up to 60,000 times. Unlike modern electron microscopes, which kill specimens with radiation, Rife's scope used light, allowing him to view live viruses in their natural state. Through his observation, Rife discovered that every pathogen, from bacteria to cancer cells, vibrates at a specific mortal oscillatory rate. He theorized that if he could transmit a radio frequency that matched this rate, the microorganism would shatter due to structural resonance, much like an opera singer shattering a wine glass with a specific note. The surrounding healthy tissue, vibrating at a different frequency, would remain unharmed. The evidence. In 1934, the University of Southern California appointed a special medical research committee to test Rife's machine on 16 terminally ill cancer patients. The patients were treated with the beam ray for 3 minutes every 3 days. The results, as recorded by the committee, were unprecedented. After 90 days, the committee concluded that 14 of the 16 patients had been completely cured. The remaining 2 were cured after an additional 4 weeks. It was a 100% success rate for terminal cases. The erasure. The head of the American Medical Association, AMA, Morris Fishbein, heard of the discovery. Allegedly, Fishbein sent an attorney to Rife and offered to buy the rights to the technology. Rife refused, suspecting the technology would be buried to protect the pharmaceutical industry's profits. Almost immediately, the takedown began. Rife was sued. His laboratory was a victim of a mysterious arson that destroyed his core research films. Police confiscated the remaining records. The doctors who had verified the 1934 study were threatened with the loss of their medical licenses and rapidly retracted their support. The beam ray was labeled as quackery, and Rife's instruments were smashed or sold for scrap. Rife eventually fled to Mexico and died in 1971 of a combination of Valium and alcohol, broken and forgotten. Today, frequency therapy is still considered pseudoscience, but one has to wonder why the establishment fought so hard to destroy a machine that supposedly didn't work. Jan Slut's digital coding system. In the late 1990s, as the internet was just beginning to reshape the world, the biggest hurdle to progress was bandwidth. Streaming video was a pipe dream, and storage was expensive. Into this landscape stepped a Dutch electronics technician named Jan Slut, who claimed to have solved the problem of digital data forever. Slut developed what he called the Slut Digital Coding System, SDCS. His claim was mathematically impossible by modern standards. He asserted he could compress a full-length feature film down to a mere 8 kilobytes. To put that in perspective, a standard movie file today is several gigabytes in size, millions of times larger than what Slut proposed. He didn't just have a theory. He had a working prototype. He demonstrated his technology to incredulous investors by playing 16 different movies simultaneously from a single 64-kilobyte chip. The implications were staggering. If Slut was right, the entire contents of the Library of Congress could fit on a device the size of a credit card. It would have eliminated the need for massive server farms, rendered data caps obsolete, and revolutionized global communication instantly. The invention caught the serious attention of Roll Piper, the former CTO of Philips, who realized this technology would make his company the king of the digital age. By September 1999, the deal was all but done. Philips was ready to back the technology, and Sloot was days away from signing a contract that would make him one of the wealthiest men in the tech sector. But 2 days before the signature was due, disaster struck. Jan Sloot was found dead in his garden of a massive heart attack. He was only 54 years old. The tragedy turned into a mystery when his partners went looking for the source code to salvage the project. Sloot was known to be paranoid about theft and kept the core algorithm, the key to compression, on a floppy disk that he carried with him at all times. When his personal effects were examined, the floppy disk was gone, despite the prototype hardware remaining without that specific compiler code. The Sloot box was a useless brick. The secret to infinite storage died in that garden, and the digital world was forced to continue down the path of massive, energy-hungry data centers instead. Wilhelm Reich's Cloudbuster. Wilhelm Reich was not your typical backyard tinkerer. He was a renowned psychoanalyst and a student of Sigmund Freud. However, his later career took a sharp turn into the esoteric when he claimed to have discovered primordial cosmic energy he called orgone. Reich believed this energy was a building block of life, and that blockages in its flow caused both physical disease and environmental chaos. To prove his theory, he built a machine in the early 1950s that looked more like an artillery weapon than a weather instrument, the Cloudbuster. The device consisted of a bank of hollow metal pipes connected to rubber hoses, which were then grounded into a body of water. Reich didn't claim to create weather. Rather, he argued that the pipes drew dead orgone energy out of the atmosphere and channeled it into the water, allowing the natural atmospheric flow to restore itself and bring rain. In 1953, 2 farmers in Maine, desperate from prolonged drought that threatened their blueberry crop, contacted Reich. He set up his Cloudbuster near Bangor. According to local newspaper reports from the time, within hours of Reich operating the machine, the sky darkened and a gentle, soaking rain began to fall, saving the harvest. Witnesses were baffled, but the crops were saved. However, Reich's work on orgone energy, which included orgone accumulators for treating cancer, drew the ire of the Food and Drug Administration, FDA. The FDA concluded that orgone did not exist and that Reich was peddling fraud. They didn't just stop him, they sought to erase him. In 1954, the FDA obtained a federal injunction against Reich. In a shocking display of censorship, federal agents raided his laboratory in Rangeley, Maine. They took tons of his books, journals, and research papers and burned them in a New York City incinerator, one of the most significant examples of government-sanctioned book burning in American history. Reich was charged with contempt of court for continuing his work and was sentenced to 2 years in federal prison. He died in his cell in 1957 of heart failure, just days before he was eligible for parole. The Cloudbuster was dismantled, his research was turned to ash, and the science of weather manipulation was firmly relegated to the realm of conspiracy. The XA safe cigarette. In the 1970s, the war on tobacco was just beginning to heat up. While public health officials were screaming about cancer risks inside the walls of the Liggett Group, one of the largest tobacco companies in the world, scientists were quietly working on a solution that could have saved millions of lives. The project was codenamed Project XA, under the direction of Dr. James Mould, Liggett's assistant director of research. The team discovered that by adding a catalyst of palladium and magnesium nitrate to the tobacco blend, they could drastically alter the combustion process. The science was sound. The palladium acted similarly to a catalytic converter in a car, breaking down the heavy hydrocarbons in smoke before they could enter the smoker's lungs. In rigorous laboratory tests, the smoke from XA cigarettes showed a 100% reduction in tumorigenicity on the backs of test mice. Mold and his team had effectively created a safe cigarette that eliminated the primary biological agents responsible for cancer. But instead of a Nobel Prize or a market-dominating product launch, the team was met with a wall of corporate panic. The problem wasn't that the invention failed. The problem was that it worked too well. Liggett's legal department realized that if they marketed a safer cigarette, they would be implicitly admitting that they're standard cigarettes. And indeed, all cigarettes sold for the past century were knowingly unsafe. This admission would strip away their plausible deniability in court, opening the floodgates for trillions of dollars in wrongful death lawsuits. The decision came down from the top. The risk to the company's bottom line was greater than the risk to the public's health. Project XA was shut down. The research was buried in the company vaults, and Liggett's executives threatened to fire anyone who spoke of the palladium cigarette. Mold later testified in court that they felt it would be better to let the sleeping dog lie. The technology that could have neutered the most deadly consumer product in history was shelved to save the industry from itself. Harry's hemp car. In 1941, Henry Ford, the father of the automotive assembly line, stood before a crowd of reporters and did something shocking. He swung an axe with full force into the trunk of his newest car. The axe bounced off. There was no dent. There was no scratch. This was Ford's vision for the future, a car grown from the soil. The body panels were not made of steel, but a bioplastic composite derived from hemp, soybeans, wheat, and flax. The resulting material was revolutionary. It was 1,000 pounds lighter than a steel car, yet 10 times stronger. Ford's engineers had created a vehicle that was safer, more fuel-efficient, and completely biodegradable. But the innovation didn't stop at the chassis. The car was designed to run on hemp biofuel, vegetable oil, rather than gasoline. Ford, a farm boy at heart, envisioned a symbiotic relationship where American farmers grew the raw materials for the automotive industry, ending the reliance on mining and drilling. He famously stated, "Why use up the forests which were centuries in the making and the mines which required ages to lay down, if we can get the equivalent of forest and mineral products in the annual growth of the hemp fields?" However, this agrarian utopia posed a lethal threat to the titans of industry. The steel barons saw a future where their metal was obsolete. The oil magnates, led by figures like William Randolph Hearst, who owned vast timberlands for his paper mills, and the DuPont family, who had just patented nylon and petrochemicals, saw a direct competitor to their synthetic products. A massive lobbying campaign ensued, not against a car, but against the planet it was made from. Through yellow journalism and political pressure, hemp was conflated with marijuana and labeled a dangerous drug. The Marijuana Tax Act of 1937 had already laid the groundwork, and the subsequent war on drugs effectively killed the industrial hemp industry in the United States. Henry Ford died in 1947, and his prototype was destroyed. The blueprints for a sustainable, plant-based transportation system were traded for a future of heavy steel, gasoline addiction, and plastic pollution. The Phoebus cartel's light bulb. This final story is different. It is not about a single invention that was destroyed, but about an entire philosophy of durability that was erased from our civilization. In a fire station in Livermore, California, hangs a light bulb. It was manufactured by the Shelby Electric Company and installed in 1901. Aside from a few short power outages, It has been burning continuously for over 120 years. This bulb, known as a centennial light, is proof that the technology to create long-lasting, durable electronics existed over a century ago. So, why do the bulbs in your house burn out every year? The answer lies in a secret meeting held in Geneva on Christmas shortly before 1925. There, the top executives from the world's leading light bulb manufacturers, including Philips, Osram, and General Electric, gathered to form the Phoebus Cartel. The cartel realized that if they kept making bulbs that lasted forever, they would eventually run out of customers. To solve this problem, they signed a document agreeing to artificially limit the lifespan of all light bulbs to 1,000 hours. This wasn't a suggestion, it was a law. The cartel created a bureaucracy to enforce it. Manufacturers had to send samples of their bulbs to a central testing laboratory in Switzerland. If a factory produced bulbs that lasted longer than 1,000 hours, they were fined heavily. For the first time in history, engineers were instructed to work backward. They spent their time researching how to make filaments more fragile, how to make glass weaker, and how to ensure the product would fail on a schedule. This was the birth of planned obsolescence. The Phoebus cartel dissolved in the late 1930s due to World War II, but the damage was done. The business model of buy, break, replace became the standard for the entire global economy. From smartphones with non-replaceable batteries to washing machines that break after 5 years, the ghost of the Phoebus cartel ensures that we live in a world of disposable technology, erasing the durable future that the centennial light quietly illuminates.